Hello. Welcome to this special Christmas edition of Whatever Happened to Pizza at McDonald's. I'm your host, Brian Thompson. Early in my investigation, I found myself at such an impasse vis-a-vis information about the end of the McDonald's pizza program that I sought spiritual guidance on my quest. I called a prayer hotline in the hopes that an all-powerful being named God could be persuaded to help me get to the bottom of why McDonald's stopped serving pizza. So far, that request has gone unanswered. But my foray into the realm of the supernatural did not prove fruitless. For the spiritual guide with whom I spoke informed me that God is not the only all-powerful creature who lives in the sky. God has a son named Jesus, who once lived here on the ground. And according to a book about Jesus, called Bible, whoever believes in him will be allowed to move to the sky after death. Thus, I became a devout Christian. This does not mean I look down upon other religions or the people who practice them. It simply means that I believe those who don't believe in Jesus will not be allowed to move to the sky when they pass away, and will instead be forced to move to an underground facility called Heck, where a dragon will be their landlord. Coincidentally, this time of year is known as the Christmas season, which is a reference to Jesus, who also went by the name of Chris. Christmas is a celebration of the birth of God's Son. The ignorant might wonder why a simple child's birth would be cause for such a massive celebration, spanning multiple cultures, continents, countries, television specials, and chocolate oranges. After all, millions of children are born in hospitals every day, where they are placed under a heat lamp for some period of time before either being sent home with their unvetted parents or sent directly to the holding facility of the nearest orphanage. In the interest of educating the ignorant and making sure none of my listeners ever find themselves in a posthumous living situation where a dragon is their landlord, I thought I would explain why the birth of God's Son, Jesus, was a special event worth celebration. Indeed, it is the most special event worth the most celebration until the return of McDonald's pizza. God's Son Jesus was born in the year 0, which archaeologists have been able to determine by counting down from this year to the year Jesus was born. From his house in the sky, God looked down at the ground through a telescope and spotted a teenager named Mary. Bible does not give us Mary's last name, but a man handing out pamphlets in front of the White House once told me that her last name was Ben David. Mary Ben David was unlike other teenagers, and that she was not bad, but was instead good. God kept several superheroes called angels as pets, and they were able to fly between the sky and the ground on account of their big, gross wings. God sent one of these angels to Mary Ben David to tell her he would be teleporting a fetus named Jesus into her stomach. Mary asked if she could call the child Chris once he was born, and God said that was okay. Later that afternoon, Mary's husband, Joseph Ben David, came home from his job as a professional whittler. As he had been whittling all day, he was quite tired, so Mary said, "You'd better sit down for this." She then explained that God had teleported a fetus into her stomach, whose name was Jesus, but she was going to call him Chris. Joseph was glad to be sitting down, as this news came as quite the shock. Unfortunately, he should have taken it a step further and lied completely flat on the floor, for another revelation startled him right out of his freshly whittled chair. He remembered that the Roman census was just around the corner, and he and Mary were required by law to return to their hometown of Bethlehem to be counted. Joseph had completely forgotten, and thus had failed to book a hotel. "What are we going to do?" Mary asked. "I guess we'll just play it by ear," Joseph said. Sure enough, when the Ben Davids arrived in Bethlehem, all the hotels were booked. But a local hotelier took pity on the couple, seeing as how Mary's stomach was now horrendously swollen with the unborn Jesus. For 25% off the normal room rate, he allowed the couple to stay in the hotel's donkey pen. In what can only be described as a miracle, the bed of hay and manure that Joseph Ben David was able to fashion for his teenage wife ended up being somewhat comfortable. Later that night, Mary gave birth to Jesus Ben David, who she called Chris. Even though he was not the biological father, Joseph cared for the child just as every stepdaddy cares for his stepboy. Several smart gentlemen brought gifts for Jesus because a star told them to. I don't know what happened to these men after that. I hope they're okay. Behold, Jesus Ben David, the only child of God, grew up to perform many feats and tricks before he was brutally murdered. And that is the story of Christmas. McDonald's pizza is gone, 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 gone. 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 Gone, 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 gone. Gone, 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 gone. Today's episode of Whatever Happened to Pizza at McDonald's is brought to you by Elf on a Shelf. Elf on a Shelf. Your children are being watched. Do you know what happened to pizza at McDonald's? Do you remember it? Please send all correspondence to pizza@mcdonalds@gmail.com, to our Twitter page at pizza@mcd's, or through Facebook at facebook.com/pizza@mcd's. Subscribe to our IJP on Apple Podcasts, and if you like the show, consider leaving a review. To provide financial support, visit patreon.com/pizza@mcd's, or to make a one-time donation, use our PayPal email address, pizza@mcdonalds@gmail.com. Merry Christmas. I'm Brian Thompson.